I'm Katherine Dunham, and I'm here representing both my father, Daniel C. Dunham, and my mother, Mary Frances Dunham. And my parents were in Dhaka from 1960, I think, to 1969. And during that time, they did a number of different jobs in the country and became very attached to the country, so that when they were back in the States in 1971 and started receiving news of what was going on in March, they were among the Americans who gathered in Washington, D.C. to support the war efforts here. My parents were freshly married. My father had just finished architecture school and had a specialty in designing buildings in hot, dry climates. And he saw a job opportunity to work in Pakistan, not knowing that there was East and West Pakistan. And my parents arrived in Dhaka with one suitcase each in the middle of monsoon. And he was put in charge of one of the first architecture offices in the country. And immediately my parents loved living here. My mother started learning the language and learned it fluently. And she got very involved in the music of Bangladesh while my father was building buildings. And then he became one of the 5 architects to start the architecture department at Buet. For my mother, because we were talking about it recently, she talks about it as an amazing, spontaneous feeling among Americans all over the country, but all who had some strong tie to Dhaka. Without any organization or any letter writing, they just all came to Washington at the same time, realizing how important it was to just educate our senators and our representatives on the complications of the U.S. involvement in this war. And I think my mother's very humble about how much my parents both did in this. But one thing I think that's now documented, we've given it to the museum, is she wrote to Nixon's wife, Patricia Nixon, a very clear letter stating that the U.S. needs to stop our support of West Pakistan. And she received a letter back from both, one letter from Mrs. Nixon as well as one letter from a representative of Mr. Nixon. So that's something that my mother does that we have to this day, that documents that she really connected right to the top to try to make an impact. And then at this event, I just learned about one document that my father was part of, which was writing the very first draft to the Foreign Assistance Bill of Saxby Church, and this is all I'm learning on this trip, in which my father helped to define the conditions of U.S. supporting Pakistan. And in this draft, they came up with the idea that the U.S. should stop all support until the Bangladeshi refugees would be willing to go back to Bangladesh. And this was clearly a big, clear statement to make. And so his first draft, I've been told by the finance minister, Muhith, they referred to it as the Dunham draft. After the cyclone, I think my father came right away to help with cyclone relief, because he'd also done that in the past. Helping with materials that were being sent for the refugees, like blankets, and but also shelter design for future cyclones. So he was here in March. I don't think he was present March 7th at the speech, but he certainly was here that month and was evacuated once the violence had started. And I think when he was evacuated, he was able to carry letters and first-hand accounts. And that was the beginning of realizing how important it was to get information out of the country to our government, basically. And so part of starting at that time, my father collected every single newspaper clipping, flyers, everything having to do with getting information to the senators in Washington. And for the refugee camps, one of the things he did was he designed a latrine that he was very proud of, because it could be built by 2 people. The materials, he weighed it so that Nothing was, the big concrete panels to make a hexagon latrine, that the panels could be carried by 2 people and then constructed without any tools or technology, and simple with 1 bucket of water could be cleaned. But he was very proud to get these latrines, and I think thousands of them were built, that they could have an immediate impact. I feel very lucky that Bangladesh is such a deep part of my upbringing, and although he's not here right now, I'm happy that my oldest son is seeing this and seeing how important it is.